Sonny Dykes gives some insight on how the schedule last season affected last year's team. The offseason schedule last season carried over into the entire season for the TCU Horned Frogs. We'll talk about that next on Lockdown Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, we're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Mike Craven is a writer for Dave Campbell's Texas Football. He's been around the state covering different programs. He was recently in Fort Worth visiting TCU and Sonny Dykes, and Sonny gave some insight into last offseason before the Frogs took the field and went 5-7 last year. And, of course, that was very disappointing for a lot of us. Wasn't the expectation that we had. But he gave an interesting reason that I feel like we've kind of maybe stumbled around at times, or people might have thought this, but it was interesting to me to hear him just directly come out and say it. So here's the quote in this Insider Notes column from Mike Craven, again, Dave Campbell's Texas Football writer. This is him saying TCU never recovered from the 65-7 loss to Georgia in the national championship game. The Horned Frogs arrived back in Fort Worth, a wounded squad, 2 days before the start of spring practice. Head coach Sonny Dykes said he allowed the team 3 weeks off to recuperate from the 15-game season, and that caused a chain of events that put the Frogs behind schedule in 2023, especially with a new offensive coordinator. In quotes, Dykes said, "It was a mess. I'm talking in Game 12, we weren't executing the way an average team would. We never felt like we caught up." So a few things there that caught my attention. One, I do remember, if we go back to the win against Michigan, playing Georgia, everything that happened. Obviously, it was amazing. Best moment in program history, winning that playoff game, right? Argue with me in the YouTube comments if you want to. But I don't really think there's much of an argument there. So you beat Michigan, and then the next day was New Year's Day. And that morning I was watching College Game Day, and they were getting everybody ready for the bowl games that were coming up that day. Not the playoff games, but just the big-time New Year's Six bowl games that are being played that day. And they interviewed Sonny Dykes and Kirby Smart. And I sort of rolled my eyes at the time when they talked to Kirby. But I do think, hindsight being 2020, there was some substance to this. So Kirby, and I think the guys on set thought he was joking, and maybe he was. But he didn't know where they were. They were in Pasadena on site there at the Rose Bowl. And he had no idea where they were. He didn't know what they were doing that day. He claims he didn't have an idea who was playing that day. They were already scouting for the national title game, which makes sense. I mean, you just hit the ground running. But I think the confluence of events that happened, one of them being Georgia got the daylight scared out of them by Ohio State. If Noah Ruggles hits that field goal, then Ohio State plays TCU in the national title game. So that was a wake-up call. And TCU bursted on the scene and got everybody's attention by winning that game against Michigan. And I don't think TCU did this intentionally. The tenor and the frame of the interview was very different with Coach Dykes. And part of that is, I mean, Sonny's just a very personal guy with the media. I mean, when he's doing media stuff, he's got a different vibe to him, right? Or maybe he's just always like that, but he's very affable and talkative and good in those situations. And he was obviously excited because I think they really emptied the tank in that Michigan game. And then they had to turn around and play Georgia. And that coaching staff, not really their fault, they just hadn't had that experience. But I'm not sure they knew exactly how to approach emotionally and just from a preparation standpoint, how to immediately turn the page and get ready for the next game. And there were other things just like depth and other issues that came into play. But you give the team 3 weeks off after that. In the process, you lose Garrett Riley, which I remember talking to my buddy Matt Jennings, because that happened really late in the offseason just because of the way the season played out. And we were both like, well, man, it looks like they're going to be able to keep all these assistants together, which was a big deal because at the time it felt like that coaching staff was on a rocket ship and, you know, they were headed to great things. Well, Garrett leaves. It takes a little while to get Kendall hired. The team takes time off, and then all of a sudden you're hitting the ground running again, and you lost a lot off that group. TCU is not Alabama or Georgia. You don't necessarily have just 4- and 5-star guys waiting in the wings ready to step in and take the next step immediately and turn the page. So all of that played a factor. But I bring this up because one of our listeners or YouTube viewers, Jim Norris, he said, I really enjoy keeping up with the Frogs on your show each week. My biggest concern this year is our offensive coach. What's your take on this issue? First of all, Jim, thank you for watching and listening to the show. Appreciate you making the time to do that. Also, if you're watching on YouTube today, I'm sorry for this feels like an interrogation room and burn notice. Like I'm moving offices at my job, so I took everything off the walls. But to answer your question, I agree with you. I think offensive play calling was an issue last year. And as much as the defense was maligned, and deservedly so, I'm not going to get on here and defend the defense. They were bad. Had a few bright moments, but for the most part, bad. And the lows were very low. Change had to happen. At the same time, I feel like for Sonny Dykes, if you're going to be, and I know he's not calling the plays, but he's an offensive mind. That's what he does. The identity of his teams, everywhere he's been, has been that they score points. They might do it in different ways. They've gotten more physical over the years. They relied more on the run game lately. But no matter where he went, he oversaw teams that scored points. And he's been effective at hiring good play callers, allowing them to do their thing. But that's what they do. So if that's going to be your deal, your offense needs to be elite. And I don't care about how many yards they had last year. I know they were really good from a total yardage perspective, total offense perspective. They were bad in the red zone. They were bad on keeping drives alive on 3rd and 4th and short, moving the chains. And their best moments last season were against subpar competition. I think when we're talking about the best teams that they played in the year, when they played good defenses, that offense struggled. The exception being the second half against Texas and the third quarter against OU. I wouldn't even really say the entire second half against Oklahoma. But they had some good moments against OU, but it was still very inconsistent. Bottom line is they have to be better this year. Now, Kendall Briles told Mike Craven, the same article, that he attributed a lot of this, the red zone issues, to turnovers. He said that 9 red zone turnovers were the biggest reason they struggled so much in the red zone. Josh Hoover's coming back. They're going to try to take care of the ball better, deep receiving core, all the things. Sonny also said that one reason they're optimistic about the offense taking the next step this year, and he's mentioned this in media availabilities after practice when he talks about specific guys. I remember him talking about Major Everhart and Jordan Bailey in this way. Just the idea that everyone has another year in this language. Like they know the verbiage now. They understand what the offense is trying to do. There's more of an identity. There's more of a focus. Again, really stinks that Josh Hoover's not taking snaps. But I don't think there's a quarterback competition happening here. And this article mentions the same thing. Mike Craven says Josh Hoover is TCU's quarterback, full stop. So that tells you where we're at. Ken Seals is a good backup quarterback to have. It's nice that he's been available to run the offense and get guys reps during spring practice. Josh Hoover's going to be the dude. So can they take a step forward this upcoming season? And yes, protecting the ball is a big deal. I mean, the Colorado game, you had 2 horrible red zone turnovers. There were, more of those throughout the season. But I'll also say I get where they're coming from with the red zone turnover issue. They also just weren't very good at scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Like it wasn't just the idea of turning the ball over. They consistently put Griffin Kell in tough situations where he was kicking like 40 or 50 plus yard field goals. Drives would stall out. When the field started to shrink, they couldn't move the chains and find the end zone. And so that was a huge part of their mistakes as well. But they got through last season, and now they have a full offseason, a more typical offseason calendar that they're going through. So hopefully that's a helpful thing for this team. And, the time off being the reason as to why they struggled in setting them behind the 8 ball, is that an excuse? Essentially, yeah, it is. But I think it can also be a good explanation or good insight into that was a really unique circumstance that I hope they're in that unique circumstance again, right? Like I hope they're playing for national titles in the future, and that this experience will be a better indicator of how they approach it. And the other part of that is hopefully they're a team with a lot more depth the next time they get close to the mountaintop or reach the mountaintop, because then you don't have to worry as much about giving everybody like a 3-week mental break if you know that you've got young players that are ready to step up and take over at the end of the season, and they've kind of been waiting in the wings, because that's what makes all these other programs so consistent. There's an expectation of they're playing deep into January each year, and so they know how to handle it. And, young guys might not be contributors on the team when they're freshmen and sophomores, but they're getting prepared to step into that role. And so it's just a machine where you're, all right, we're making these runs. Guys are leaving, guys are coming in, but everything is staying very cohesive. Everyone knows what they're doing. They're pulling the same rope. So year 2 in this offense, can they make a jump? I think it's one of the big questions for the season. Defense needs to be better. I personally think the defense is going to be better. I'm not super worried about them improving. I feel like it's really just a question of how much will they improve. But the offense has to be more efficient. They have to take care of the ball better. And if they play complementary football, which is something that Drake talked to me about when I had him on last week, that'll be a huge key as well. Can you put your defense in good field position situations? Like we talk about field position for offense, but can you avoid putting your defense in bad spots where they're having to defend a short field? Can you give them a chance to catch their breath and make adjustments because you're not going 3 and out at a high speed and then immediately throwing them back on the field? And can the defense force turnovers, force negative plays, and make life easier on the offense as well? That's going to be a big part of any program. But like for TCU this year, it was something that was sorely missing this past season. When we come back, both the TCU men's and women's basketball teams added a couple players to the roster yesterday. We'll talk about that and more next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team, and we do it here every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, it's your team every day. If you need tickets, there's a bunch of different options. You can go straight to the source. You can hit the secondary market. Why don't you try the Gametime app? If you use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. I use the Gametime app personally. It's been fantastic. On Sunday, Nate Bargatze was down in Austin. He's one of my favorite comedians, right? My wife, some of my friends were going, and my wife was like, man, I guess I should have looked at getting us tickets for that. And I was like, yeah, but, we won't. It's fine. I'm sure it's super expensive and have to get the babysitter, the whole bit. Like, it's a thing. But I was looking on the Gametime app, and I found tickets for less than $100 the day before the event. So we were able to get, the parents to watch the kids. We drove down there after church on Sunday, made it by 3 o'clock. Great show. The Be Funny tour. It was wonderful. It's not just sports, theater productions, concerts, comedy shows. Download the Gametime app today. It's the best place for last-minute tickets. They have flash deals. You can even buy them after the event starts. They'll sell tickets an hour into the event. Again, that promo code is LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. LOCKEDONCollege, $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today and find the easiest way to get tickets. Gametime app, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. Also, want to tell you about FanDuel. It's where the game starts, and you can make your first bet. You can make money with your first bet, win or lose, because you put a $5 bet down at FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets. Again, that's $150 in bonus bets with one $5 bet, win or lose. You can bet on the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. Hope the Stars and the Mavericks can turn it around over the next few days. Major League Baseball in full swing. Whatever it is that you love, that you're interested in, that you want to try to make some money on, FanDuel.com/lockedon. First $5 bet for new customers. You get $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel also has an app that is easy to navigate and easy to use. FanDuel, official betting partner of the NBA and a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. TCU men's basketball, they added another player to the fold yesterday. Already had gotten the commitment from Frankie Collins, point guard from Arizona State. And then on Monday landed Noah Reynolds, who has most recently been at Green Bay. He also spent his first 2 seasons of his career at Wyoming, but had a breakout season in the Horizon League last year. Averaged 20 points a game, shot 34% from three, 51% from the field. So was a really good shooter last year. Also 4.5 assists, so a willing distributor. At Wyoming the year before, he averaged 14 points a game on 48% shooting from the field and 32% shooting from three. I really like this pickup. I've been saying for weeks now, since the season ended, I think the biggest issue with TCU basketball and their half-court offense this past season was the lack of shooting, the inability to space the floor. We saw Baylor do this in Fort Worth, and then other teams adopted it. Utah State went to it early in that ball game. They're playing zone. Early in that NCAA tournament game, one of the things that the broadcast team said was that Utah State plays more, they play more man defense than almost anybody in the country. That's what they do. That's what Danny Sprinkle is known for. They play man defense. They're going to guard their guys. Well, after the first few minutes of that ball game, they switched into a 1-3-1 zone, and they dared TCU to shoot from the perimeter, and the Frogs couldn't do it. Trey Tennyson, as the year went on, kind of lost his confidence. That affected a lot of this too. But my biggest plea to Jamie Dixon and his coaching staff, you have to find shooters. You have to find knockdown shooters. I mean, Chuck O'Bannon in the last few years has been that guy at times, but he was very streaky. And I know they went and got Trey Tennyson last offseason with mixed returns, but this is a good pickup. This is a guy in Noah Reynolds who can score off the bounce, create his own shot, is willing to pass the ball, but more importantly, can knock down open threes. And with Frankie Collins most likely running at the point guard position, then this allows Reynolds to play off the ball, shoot, and move around, call screens, be a threat that they can exploit and find matchups for. So I hope this is the start of adding, just in general, more shooting from this basketball team. They're going to rely a lot on Jace Posey and Isaiah Manning, the young. They'll be redshirt freshmen this upcoming season. They didn't play last year. Also a big-time recruiting class that's coming in. But I would expect more portal commits. Jacoby Coles and Micah Peavy have moved on. If you missed that, Micah Peavy committed to Georgetown. Jacoby Coles committed to Grand Canyon. So neither of those guys are going to be back. One thing that Jamie Plunkett mentioned as well with these two guards, with Collins and Reynolds, Ernest Uday is a great athlete, and he's really active in, pick and roll situation. They used him a lot, especially in non-conference and like lobs, trying to get him dunks. He said, I really like the additions of Frankie Collins and Noah Reynolds for TCU basketball. They're both capable ball handlers and scorers who are great off screens. Love the pairing with Ernest Uday. Lots of pick and roll potential for the squad. So you bring Ernest up to set picks, and then they can go create their own shot. They can shoot from deep, or they can, if teams are going to blitz them, hopefully make good decisions, find Ernest and other players for easy baskets. So nice pickup by Jamie Dixon and coaching staff, going and landing Noah Reynolds from Green Bay, averaged 20 points a game there in the Horizon League this past season. The TCU women, they also added a player yesterday. Taylor Bigby from USC. She averaged 4.8 points per game last year in about 20 minutes of playing time typically. Also had an assist and a rebound, adding to the stat sheet, and averaged 4 points the season before in about the same amount of minutes. So was a key bench contributor for USC the past few seasons, which they made the Elite Eight this past year with Juju Watkins, I don't think they were a Final Four team. I think Elite Eight team with Juju Watkins. I believe they fell to UConn, and UConn ended up playing Iowa in the Final Four. But anyway, good team last year that she was on. Highly rated recruit. Started her career at Oregon. So again, that Oregon connection that's been very typical for Mark Campbell. But another nice pickup, another person to add to the rotation. And it seems like they're trying to surround Sedona Prince with capable guards who can shoot and create their own shots. So if teams are going to collapse on her and try to take away her as a scoring threat in the post, she can kick it out and make things happen with her ability to pass the basketball. TCU baseball, they are back in action tonight, and we'll also get to some of your reactions from yesterday's show. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. Again, your team every day. Are you a competitive person that's looking for something to do when you're sitting at a restaurant waiting for your to-go order that's not just scrolling on Instagram or Twitter? Why don't you download Monopoly Go from the Apple Store or Google Play? It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on the classic Monopoly game where you play on not one but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is you can play with your friends. You can charge them rent on iconic properties, just like Monopoly. And the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. It's not just your competitive side that will love it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world and time tournaments to earn huge rewards. To get on the game, download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. And that's Monopoly Go. Download it for free in the App Store or on Google Play. TCU baseball takes on DBU tonight before a weekend series with Kansas State. Desperately trying to turn this thing around, turn the tide. They did beat DBU earlier this season, which might be their best standalone win of the year. I'd have to kind of look through the schedule again, but that was a good victory. Beating Oklahoma State on Friday night with Peyton Tolle pitching on the road was good. Also beat Texas on Friday with Peyton pitching. You're sensing a theme here, right? Cademan Parker getting the start tonight. So he'll get a chance to go against a good DBU lineup. Always fun playing the Patriots, even though they're a good program and it's a tough midweek game. Frogs have dropped a couple midweek games in a row. This would be good, I think, for morale and just kind of hopefully carrying that momentum into a key series against Kansas State. Running out of time to get this thing turned. You got to do it in a hurry if you're going to find a way to make the Big 12 tournament one and then the NCAA tournament beyond that. A few of you had some reactions to yesterday's show. Justin McGuffey asked me my record prediction for this upcoming season. I said 8-4. That's where I'm at right now. And so he asked me what I thought the losses would be on the schedule. And he mentioned he thinks the 4 losses will be Kansas, Utah, Arizona, and maybe Oklahoma State. I mean, that's a pretty safe bet. Here's what I'll say about next year's team, one of the many things that I'm hoping to see improvement on. Last season, they didn't really beat anybody that they shouldn't have. Like, they didn't honestly pull off an upset all year long. Now, I guess you could consider the BYU game an upset. I remember the Vegas line still had them favored, which was confusing to some of us. But, typically, like, BYU was not a great team last year. And usually if it's pretty even teams, even with Josh Hoover making his first career start, the home team is going to get the points advantage. But Hoover was great in that game. They just wiped the floor with BYU, won big. That was honestly the biggest surprise of the season in a positive way. They didn't really pull off, an upset against a big-name team despite the rough year. So where do I see the losses? I mean, at Utah is going to be tough. I think Arizona – It's hard to predict that game right now because it's so far down the road, but that's another one I would circle. Oklahoma State potentially. I feel like if they're going to take a step forward, at Kansas is a game that they should win. I know Jalen Daniels is a great player. We don't know what his health is going to be like this year, but he's outstanding when he's on the field. That game's going to be at Arrowhead, so it should be a cool environment. Some other games that I would just wonder about that in my mind are coin flips. Texas Tech beat TCU last year in Lubbock. Now it's at home, which will help. And I'm not totally sure where the Red Raiders are with their quarterback situation. I think it's going to be Behren Morton. And then they've handled Baylor so well in the past decade. But I do think the Bears will be improved. DeQuan Finn coming over from Toledo, MAC Player of the Year. I thought that was a good pickup. We won't know what this looks like until the season starts, but Dave Aranda is a good defensive coordinator, or was at LSU and at other stops. So him being more hands-on and more involved with the defense would seem to make sense that there would be an improvement there as well. So those are the games that I think are going to be coin flips. But I feel like they end up 8-4. They'll probably win a game or two that we don't expect, and I feel like they'll probably lose a game that they shouldn't, or that they'll be favored in going into that week. But yeah, I mean, this schedule, I know a lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, a lot of the marquee names are gone. It should be really manageable. I don't know. I still think there's a lot of good teams on the schedule. And based on what we saw last year, I think a lot of these games are going to be tough. But hopefully they're improved. And, if they are, then it's obviously going to make a big difference in how the season plays out. So we'll have plenty of time to talk more about that. We'll have a lot more baseball and basketball coverage as well. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team. We do it here every day.